I am Bishop Ernest L. Jackson, and I am a pastor. I pastor a church in the Bayview Hunters Point community of San Francisco, and I also fill in as an adjunct professor here at San Francisco Theological Seminary as well.
Excellent. What is the greatest need that you see in your line of work?
We are in such a chaotic state today in terms of our society and the community in which I serve in. I think it's the trying to bring some semblance of peace and connection and relationship to the community in which I serve. There's this whole idea of a troubling society in which we live. So I would like, in terms of my involvement here, what I try to do is bring relationships together across the inter-communities, if you will, that they be able to work together and find some justice, if you will, which is a key theme that keeps reoccurring within our community. Social justice, personal justice as well, and familial justice within families. The Applied Wisdom Institute brings about, it not just takes theory, but it trains the leadership and pastors, people like myself, and how to put things, to implement these into a practical world, and how to achieve some of the goals that actually forces us to think outside of the box, if you will. And that becomes a tremendous challenge. We might see the problem, but we don't always understand how to approach it, and that's what the Wisdom Institute does. So we're working on something dealing with mental health. It's a mental health in our society, which even bleeds into our church, is a major problem. In my community, we have a high rate of violence, where there's a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder that comes out of these incidences of violence that people suffer. How do you treat that from the pulpit? That's a major issue, where a lot of pastors don't want to address the issue of mental illness in the church or dealing with spirituality. And that's a very key component with this course and curriculum that we're putting together now. I think it's going to add tremendous value from an intellectual perspective, but also that value then can permeate throughout the congregations in the community in which we serve. Well, I think maybe my input was dealing with real life situations where I would see a young person murdered on the street, and what we do, we take that person, we bring that person in front of us at a funeral, if you will, and then we take that person to the cemetery, that person's body, and it ends for us. But that's not the true end, because what's happening then is that the family, the friends, the community yet suffers from the pain of loss, the grief, and the tragedy behind that incident. How we address that, how we deal with that, should not stop at the cemetery, but it should go beyond that. And how we begin counseling, we need to be prepared, better prepared than we have ever been, because if post-traumatic stress disorder is not dealt with, it becomes what is inorganic becomes an organic manifestation in how people play out violence. It's reoccurring because of the lack of counseling, the lack of support that is being offered to a community. I think we want to blend the spiritual component with the mental health component. And blending that, what we're trying to say to spiritual leaders is that you can only go so far, and that's being very blunt. You don't have all of the answers that perhaps lie in the area of psychology or with a psychiatrist. Certainly, we're not diminishing anything about our spiritual formation, but we're challenged in integrating these two aspects together, spirituality and mental health. We're challenged because where we are limited, we have to be able to say to the mental health community, we need your help. We need your help with this particular person or this particular family. We need your help in our community. What can you do? And so training, it's not a theoretical, but this is really where I believe the rubber will meet the road, if you can use that, in terms of bringing these two together and integrating spirituality and mental health to train pastors and spiritual leaders how to go out and refer and be effective. I shouldn't have to worry about saying to one of my parishioners, I can only counsel you so far with your problem with alcohol, or with your problem with drugs, or the violence that's happening in your home right now. And I can go so far with that, but I know some professionals that can take you the rest of the way. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to be praying for you. From my perspective, I believe that it's a community of social workers, community of spiritual leaders, pastors, rabbis, a community of advocates in the community. The mother that lives down the street that has great influence in the community, and by her voice, the community stops and listens. It's almost like an E.F. Hutton thing, if you will. So we should pull people in from the various key components within our community and offer and have these course offerings for them as well. We like to just isolate ourselves to the priesthood or the pastors, but if we're going to conquer and deal with mental illness, we've got to open this up, and we've got to start thinking in a broader fashion as pastors and as spiritual leaders, and actually become evangelists, if you will, to champion this mental health and spirituality within our communities. The course, I believe, will take you beyond, and I keep bringing this up, the theoretical threshold, the mindset, if you will. What this course offers, you won't really find in a textbook. We've got to go beyond what a textbook might offer and say, here's some real tools that you can use and you can take back to your congregation, to your community, that would make you more relevant and effective in how you look at a person that's dealing with mental illness. How can you discern mental illness and measure that up against maybe a spiritual challenge that you've been trained to do. That has been heretofore one of the problems I think we've had. We've tried to put everything in a spiritual box, and that's not always the right solution, and it has not proven to be effective because we have been afraid to talk about being mentally ill in the church. So this course will help pastors and spiritual leaders and advisors how to assess mental illness, whether it's coming from violence, whether it's coming from drugs, whether it's coming from something that's inorganic, that's happening in a person's life due to something that's been passed on from one generation to another. I think that we're going to see some things opening up that have not existed before. You're going to be able to a certificate let's say that that mother in the community that is just taking care of, she only sees herself as a quote unquote housewife or homemaker. If she goes through this course, she will have a certificate that says that she is qualified to be a peer counselor. She can speak, she can say to the lady down the street who just lost her son through, as a result of a drive-by, you know, come, let me talk to you. Let's sit down and talk. Let me take you through some healing processes that you need. Whether it be, she might bring other folks in, like I can take you here, I can counsel you, but there's a psychologist I'd like for you to meet with. She could have it as a one-on-one, or she might have a group setting in her own home, a place that is the people that attend will feel safe, that they will feel that they can say what they need to say and express what they need to say without being judged or without being hurt, if you will. Besides the fact that I have my own input into this program, I think this is one of the most unique programs that currently exist, that you will be able to see results within a matter of months as people are coming in, getting trained. I think people will begin to, I'm going to use that mother again, that mother down the street. She will have a level of self-esteem that she's making a change. Maybe she herself has been through a very traumatic experience, and she's picked up some tools that will help her be more effective, and tools that will help her identify her own issues and her own concerns about the trauma or something that she's gone through. Now, I think the value of giving back into a community or congregation that has experienced some hurt and some trauma is priceless. I believe that the Applied Wisdom Institute, as they begin to implement these programs of spirituality and mental health, it's one of these each one, reach one type of models or paradigms where people will become, those that have gone through the program will become the best marketeers, if you will, or the best evangelists to say to the community, listen, I have a place that you can come and get some help. I think we've got to get rid of this whole stigma about mental health in our communities and not look at it as something that is spoken of quietly. But this is something that if we can get people to start thinking of mental health as like a common cold, and it's not, you don't have to be embarrassed because you're dealing with some demon, if you will, some mental demon, then that is how the world is going to change. And it will change exponentially. You know, it's not going to, all it takes is a couple or two or three, and it begins to grow and begin to morph into something that I think is going to be make tremendous changes within our congregations, within our communities, and ultimately within society as a whole. I think for me, I've seen so much as a pastor, buried so many people, young people, that I recall one time that I could not attend another funeral because how I didn't even realize I wasn't sleeping, I couldn't hardly eat, and I couldn't put my finger on what was going on. And it occurred to me at a particular time I had attended and had overseen about 5 funerals, almost back to back, of young kids who had been brutally murdered. And even though I was leading, I was the leader, I was the pastor, I didn't realize how it had affected me. And it had affected me psychologically to the point that I was beginning to manifest what was going on with me physically. And I realized then, if I'm feeling this, like, what's happening with that family or those families, with that community? There were others like me who I was hurting, and I had to admit that I was hurt by the trauma and by the grief and by the loss, that I would get up and stand and look stoic and preach a good message about a person's life, but I was bleeding on the inside myself. And so I see this, I'm turning cartwheels about this program because I see how it's going to help people who are hurting. And that's really what my job is at the end of the day, to help hurting people and to help them pick up the pieces of their lives and begin to move forward and become socially viable and effective in helping other people as well. I believe that this can be something that is just transferred from one person to the next, effortlessly, if you will. You know, there will be some challenges, but I think through the Applied Wisdom Institute, with the tools that they have to offer, those challenges can be overcome.